Hello, everybody. This is Rooster with Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. I have a little history story I want to relate to you today. If you don't mind, kind of bear with me. My throat's kind of raw today, so I'm going to try to get through this the best I can. Um, anyway, this story involves a famous rooster from Robertson County. His name was Jake Donelson, and he became famous during the war between the states. And before I tell you his story, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Company H of the 3rd Tennessee Regiment was organized at Cornersville in Marshall County, Tennessee. They were organized in the spring of 1861 for service in the Confederate Army. Jerome B. McCandless was one of its lieutenants. The regiment, along with Lieutenant McCandless, was sent to Camp Cheatham in Robertson County, Tennessee, for training. Camp Cheatham was located between Springfield and Cedar Hill at what was once known as Kenny's Station. It was used to train both infantry and the cavalry, and at one time several thousand soldiers were in camp there. On May 25, 1861, while the company was in training at Camp Cheatham, one of the local farmers came into camp selling eggs and chickens to the soldiers. Among these chickens was a young red rooster, for which McCandless purchased for 1 silver dime. This rooster was originally destined for the stew pot, and the only thing that saved him from becoming a meal was his fighting ability, being able to whip any rooster presented to him. Lieutenant McCandless adopted the rooster as his own and christened him Jake Donelson. Jake fought and whipped several rival roosters that belonged to other companies stationed there. Jake even traveled with his master to Fort Donelson, where he perched upon the breastworks and crowed loudly when he heard the incoming artillery shells. He was there when Fort Donelson fell on February 16th, 1862. Jake then accompanied his fellow soldiers into captivity, cheering them up with his loud crowing as they marched through the streets of Chicago on their way to Camp Douglas, the military prison. It is said that his crowing encouraged the troops to give the rebel yell as they marched along the streets. Camp Douglas was notorious for its cruel treatment of the prisoners, with starvation being a leading cause of death. It's hard to imagine with the prisoners having to eat rats, paper, and even shoe leather to stay alive, that they would even allow a rooster to survive. And what's more amazing is the fact that the Union guards didn't try to eat him. Well, I'm pretty sure the thought crossed their minds many times. While there at Camp Douglas, Jake found it lonely. And it is until he found himself a mate known as Madam Hen. Jake mysteriously disappeared at Camp Douglas for a few days, and all the boys from Tennessee, all they needed to write was the smell of chicken stew. They pressed the guards as to what had happened to Jake. These starving, emaciated men were mad, and they wanted their rooster back. Thankfully, after 3 days, Jake showed back up at Camp Douglas with his hen, and with him were 3 young roosters. The boys were so delighted that they even held a wedding for Jake and his bride. These 3 young roosters were named Jeff Davis, Stonewall Jackson, and General Morgan. In spite of the thousands of starving prisoners who would have gladly sold their soul to the devil for a good meal, Jake and his family somehow managed to escape the stew pot. And after 7 long months of harsh, brutal captivity, the Confederate prisoners, along with Jake, his wife, and 3 sons, were sent to Vicksburg, Mississippi, where they were exchanged. It was here that Jake's family was broken up, with General Morgan going with Lieutenant McCandless's brother. Jeff Davis went with Will Everly to Pulaski, and Stonewall Jackson with Colonel Harvey Walker to Linville. While in camp at Vicksburg, McCandless had Jake's portrait painted. Jake was mustered out and went to Marshall County, Tennessee, where his fame had preceded him. Citizens came from miles around to see and welcome the old warrior back home. Jake lived out his days at the McCandless homestead at Cornersville, where he died in 1864. Jake's portrait was hung in a place of honor over the fireplace in the McCandless home. Jake was truly a legend in Middle Tennessee. When Jake passed away, he was placed in a flag-draped metal casket with a full military escort. He was given full military honors at his funeral, as hundreds attended. There is a Jake Donelson Park where he is believed to be buried, although the exact location of his grave is unknown at this time. He has a monument with a rooster on top and has his own Civil War Trails marker in Cornersville, Tennessee. Lieutenant Jerome McCandless was surrendered with Johnston's army in North Carolina. He lived until 1906 and reported to have carried Jake's portrait to several reunions of Confederate veterans. Who would have thought a rooster from Robertson County would have become that famous? It seemed harder to believe that a rooster could have survived that long in a prisoner of war camp where most of the prisoners were dying of starvation. Anyway, this is the Dooster. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel. If you like it, give me a like. Share it among your friends. And until we meet again, have a good one.